Give me time. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll put myself on mute as well.
That's fine, bro. Thank you.
I'm gonna take you off too.
Welcome to Did You Know with Richard Utley. During this 1 hour program, join us as we take a look at today's headline news, Richard's views, history, inspirational interviews, and much more. Did you know this program airs every first and third Tuesday at 11 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube? Here's Richard now. Sit back and enjoy today's featured presentation.
Welcome to another Did You Know? Boy, we got an interesting program today. I have a couple guests on to talk about a number of different things. But I just want to say a few things. Ladies and gentlemen, as we see the world turning, we're very much involved in that. And I don't want you to get caught up in, there's a lot of things that's affecting you, and we need to stay on top of it. And that's why I keep telling you we need to do our own research and our own homework. And we got to keep the eye on the needle because a lot of things is going on. Whether they talk about the war or whether they talk about the Epstein files, yes, they are major. But guess what? You live in America and our neighborhoods is going to hell. And we need to be wishful up on top of that. We need to make sure that we okay. See, what happens is we get confused. We get so involved in other things, and the little things that affect you is going to affect you. That's why it's very important for you to register to vote. Whether you don't, you got to register. Here's the issue, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have to become our own power players. We're going to have to look out for ourselves. We've been waiting. I've been saying this ever since I had this program. We keep waiting on some horse to come down through and help us. And what happens is we respond when the horse is already out the barn. And that's why from now on that we have to make sure that we're on top of stuff. Don't let anybody else do it. We need to do it. We owe it to ourselves and our community to stay on top of things. So there's no more excuses because you see what's happening. Everybody has their own vested interests, and we need to have our own vested interests. So I'm saying to you today, 3 things. Do your homework, do your research, find out what's going on. Find out what's going on in your neighborhood. Find out what's going on in your school district. Find out what's going on in government itself that affects you. Because I look back at this and I say sometimes that we get confused. Just like this whole thing about birthrights. Think about that. You need to stay on top of birthrights. You may not think it affects you, but it may affect you. See, sometimes like I said, we react after the fact, and I just think that we have to be much more pro. There's a big issue now about our information. Where are we getting our information from? You get your information from Facebook, or you get your information what somebody tells you, but you don't do no follow-up. We don't have the media like we used to have. Remember, way back, most towns and neighborhoods had newspapers, they had radio, they had TV, so you was informed. You had the Jet magazine, you had the Ebony, you had the Pittsburgh Courier, you had the Philadelphia Defender, you had all these newspapers that gave you information. We don't have that information anymore. And since we don't have that information, everything is on social media, and everything on social media ain't always true. So that's why you got to look at your own research. The other thing I keep saying, we got to do our own history. We need to tell our story. And the reason why we need to tell our story, and I can say this today because I feel so good about it. Once you learn your history, and once we tell our story, then we will realize we are some people of surviving. We have survived. Believe me, it looks bad now, but our forefathers gave us so much strength to survive. And so therefore, no matter what they throw at us, we should be able to survive it. We're not going anywhere. America, we ain't going nowhere. And you ain't sending us nowhere. And you probably say, why would he say something like that? Well, maybe some of you need to do some research on Marcus Garvey. Half of you probably say, who is that? Find out about that. Find out about people that had visions to going not here, staying here, or going across to Africa. We're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere at all. The other thing I want to say to you is if we don't look out for ourselves, then shame on us. I'll give you an example. You know, people don't really understand. Let's take I'll give you a primary example. 2 things in Pennsylvania, because I know people listen to me all over. You know, they have this assistance program called LIHE. It's a low-income home energy assistance program. Well, that helps people with fuel, oil, and things like that during the winter. Well, with Trump's cuts, PA could lose millions of dollars to pay for heating bills. PA used to get about $2 million. 300,000 low-income families with their heating bills. Now, just think about that. So some of you may not realize it affects everybody. See, we get confused sometimes. We get confused because it doesn't affect us. But guess what? It ain't got nothing to do with race. It ain't got nothing to do with gender. It has to do with people. Whether you're urban, whether you're rural, or whether you're a senior citizen. So my point is, you better start voting your vested interest. And you better speak up. And some of you, and I understand this, you say, well, it don't affect me. It may not affect you today, but it may affect you tomorrow. These are things that we need to be on top of. You know, PA is also affecting cuts on SNAP. You know, that's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or food stamps that we know. Hey, it's urban, yes, but it's rural too, yes. It's senior citizens. I have seen some senior citizens that I was a little put back by a couple weeks ago. I saw some very prominent people that I knew when I was growing up. I thought they was prominent, and they were prominent. And guess what? They at the food bank. I said hi to one lady. She was ashamed. I said, hi, how you doing? She's like, oh, how you? It's okay. It's all right. It's okay. It's all right. Sometimes we're too proud to stand up and say what we're for and what we're not for. But my attitude is very simple. It affects us all. It may not affect you today, but it might affect you tomorrow. It may affect your brother, your cousin, or your sisters. So let us stop being so selfish and say, if it don't affect me, I don't care. Because I think, ladies and gentlemen, we all going to have to hold hands together, and we're going to have to help each other. Because you're on top today, you may not be tomorrow. So, as I tell you all the time, life has peaks and valleys. Of course, in life, you want to have more peaks than valleys. But we all go through peaks and valleys. So let's be a little bit more concerned about what's going on around us. So be a little bit more kinder and passionate to who we are. Because today, I have a very interesting program. We're going to talk about, before that my other guest come on being a black man, we're going to talk about something else at first. I have a gentleman on that he has a vision and things that he wants to do and things that he feels that he wants to help the community. And he has a program called Coaching, Coffee, and Conversation. And I have him on for a few minutes so he can tell you what he's trying to do so we can have a better life. Sir, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Richard. I really appreciate giving me a few minutes of your time today. It's always awesome to talk about Coaching, Coffee, and Conversation, which will be held at Dunkin' Donuts, located 6075 Allentown Boulevard in Harrisburg on April the 25th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Free coffee, donuts. Dunkin', a little bit about Coaching, Coffee, and Conversation. If you ever heard of speed dating, very similar to speed dating, except this is, you're not meeting people to talk about going out on a date. Typically, we find experts from 10 different industries, law, medicine, you name it, technology, and you have the opportunity to sit in front of someone for about 5 minutes, and you chat with them briefly about a particular topic in that industry. Like if I sat down in front of a lawyer, I talk to the lawyer would give you tips and strategies in 5 minutes, and then you get up and go to the next person that may be a physician, and he or she would talk to you about some things you may do for the springs, pollen. There's a lot of pollen going on. And then it go on and on. A third person may be a police officer. You get a chance to talk about the safety issues. Next person may be a firefighter. So you get the gist of what it's all about. It's designed to provide attendees from all walks of life tips and strategies to empower you personally and professionally. We all know some of our challenges that affect us personally affects us professionally. And then more importantly, this is designed to ignite the fire within and drive the human spirit. And as we know, the spirit is readily broken across America, but here in local in PA. But when we can create programs like this that can empower people, the reason why it's called Coaching, Coffee, and Conversation. We all been coached before, whether it's uncle, friend, mom, dad, teacher, grandmother. We've all had some kind of coaching, right? Because it's important. Coffee. Coffee is the most consumed beverage in the world. And the great thing about coffee, it fuels conversation. It's some of the most important conversations that have changed our lives and your lives have been over a cup of coffee or just over conversation. You never know how we can be inspired through conversation, and especially when we have an information, let's say, from talking to the project, this event, talk to someone, let's say, from H&R Block, and they're able to give you some tips and strategies about taxes. Let's say you have children or you have a business, and you say, well, I just started a business 6 months ago. What do I do? Well, here's some tips and strategies in terms of you may need with your business, because you're a business owner. So this is a very exciting event. We'll also be talking about it on Good Day PA on April 20th, talking about a Coaching, Coffee, and Conversation. And I employ people to come out, free coffee, free event, free donuts, free information. If you're looking to be empowered and inspired and be better, and to ensure that the people around us are better, then that's a win-win situation. And that's why I'm excited that Richard.
What made you What made you want to do this? Because you just said about power. You just talked about working together. What made you decide that you even wanted to do something like this?
Well, why not? I think that I'm a product of the South Side of Chicago. My mother picked cotton, grandmother picked cotton in the slum fields of sharecroppers in Mississippi. So I have a birthright, not a civil right or a human right. I have a birthright to give and empower. I think that when you have a vision, you should utilize your vision. And part of the vision I've had growing up in Chicago is to help transform communities. And I think that you can transform the human spirit. You can transform communities, and Coaching, Coffee, and Conversation is a platform that can transform the human spirit. And when we transform the spirit, we indirectly transform the community. So that is what inspired me to.
I think it's very important what you said, because there's so many people out there that have so much knowledge, have so much value, and would you agree we need to do a better job in reaching out to the community and telling people about that? Because that's why we're going to end up going into my segment, because role models. We may have had role models, or we may have people that were doing well. And we could touch them and we could feel them. Now, there's no touchy, there's no feely, because everything is on social media and some things get out of hand. That's why I have this program, Did You Know? I want people to know about your program. I want them to go up there and check it out. But at the same time, what you're doing, there's so many other people out there that could be doing so much. Here's my point, ladies and gentlemen. Our community needs help. We need help. And we need help. But the most important thing I want to say when I say we need help, we need to step up to the plate ourselves. We owe it to people who reach back to us, and we pulled us. You know, you. One of the things, and I'm getting ready to go into, one of the things you said that was very interesting. You said, oh, you know, my family, they pick cotton and blah, blah. And that was always when people, a lot of people who see that on TV and whatever, I hear a lot of, because I hear them, well, they wouldn't do it or they wouldn't do this. Or when you see those people, you have to put a face to them. And a lot of times when people see pictures of people with picking cotton or tobacco, they don't put a face to it. And we need to start putting faces to our forefathers that did a lot. They took jobs that nobody else would take. You know, I had somebody on a couple of weeks ago, Phyllis Hicks, talking about kidneys and talking about diabetes and high blood pressure. And people don't really think about it. Our diet started way, way, way back when that's the only food that they gave us was food that would give us diabetes or give us high blood pressure. Because, you know, even in my life, I'm told, well, you know, it's hereditary. You know, diabetes is hereditary. High blood pressure is hereditary. Why? Because of what they was eating. But we don't realize it, that we started from behind the 8 ball. And that's why I'm just so happy and encouraging that we've come a long way. Now, in saying that, even though your forefathers picked cotton, it didn't define you. My mother's family picked cotton and tobacco in South Carolina. I saw it with my own eyes, but it didn't define me. My point is this here. Don't let certain circumstances define you. Sometimes you have to define yourself. Would you agree with that?
Well, I concur 100%. I think I started this show without introducing myself. My name is I'm recognized as Ignite Coach Ron Mitchell. And when you talk about circumstances defining me, I owe a great debt to my community in Chicago, and to, you mentioned diet and being behind the 8 ball, but the beautiful thing about it is we have an opportunity to make unprecedented advance, whether it's personally, professionally, medicine, technology. We've been afforded, because our forefathers, whose shoulders we stand on, who were extremely brilliant, strong, didn't give up. I was afforded the opportunity to do a lot of things, and so I think it's very, very important that I create programs like this, because leaders like yourself, Richard, you've made a unmatched contribution to this local community and the world, and so I'm very grateful I can get a chance to meet and see somebody like you, which is empowering to me. It helps to fuel my diet.
I got you.
And inspire my diet. And so I want to say thank you for what you've done.
Well, thank you, but you know, I'm supposed to do what I'm doing, and we're supposed to do what we're doing. You know, it's about each other, and we're going to have to go back to that family concept. And so I'm going to go right into my next guest. I have Mark Hawthorne on, and you know, he's the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club, and him and we're going to talk about. And I called him up and I said, hey, I want to have a conversation about something. And he said, and what is that? And I said, being a black man. And he said, being a black man. I said, I want to have a conversation about it, but I want to flip it just a little bit. We are out of control. When I see these, and here's what I mean by that. When I see, I'm just using that. It could be a different scenario. People running around, knocking people in the head. You know, my father was scared to sit out on the porch after 6 o'clock at night because he was scared somebody was going to mug him and beat him up. And people going into stores and just doing all kinds of things. And this is very interesting. You know, we hear about it in, whether it's Harrisburg, we found out that people in Pittsburgh were scared to go downtown because of kids acting crazy. And we hear about it, and we also hear about it in other cities You know what? It's all over. I was in London, and guess what? Same thing. Kids running in the store and taking stuff and just running away with it. So I wanted Mark to come on. Mark, I want you to come on because you're the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club. But I want you to say why are we having some of the problems that we're having from your perspective?
Good morning, Richard, and your guests, and thanks for having me. That's a twofold question. It has a lot of, to me, a lot of landing points.
Hmm.
Um, but as you kind of indicated, I kind of looked at, when you asked me about this, I start reflecting again about, and as you were talking about your background in Pittsburgh and, my background here, either in Harrisburg or when I lived in the Bay Area for over 20 years. Um, we had a lot of the same. When you go around the world, you see a lot of the same things, and a lot of it revolves about us being having without and doing without, but hopefully doing better at that time we think than we're doing now. Um, but we definitely had. I was thinking of some of the folks who were leaders in our community, who folks who looked after young people, who were folks who kind of we admired. And, me, a young kid coming up in the 70s and 80s, we had some of those guys who were coming home from the army, some of those guys who had afros, some of the guys on the corner, you know, uh, who had change and money. And it depends on what direction I think you wanted to take. But I think it was, but what I'm sure you had, and is what I always had, was when I came home, all that street stuff changed. You know what I mean? That stuff didn't come inside the house. You know what I mean? So whatever I saw on the streets, I was not able to implement in my house, whether I was living with my mother or my grandparents. And when I came in, they became my examples of every day, and those examples were going to school, going to do your chores, doing what you're supposed to do to help out the house and the family. So um, in my position, I'm seeing young people today. I see them quite often. And since you're talking about black men, I look at black boys keenly because I was once one of them. And these boys don't have some of those same basic components that I imagine you had and I had once we left the streets or the corners, or those folks who might have not given us some of those prime examples. I know they don't. I see that because I see what they go to. I see how they interact and communicate with each other. Um, but fortunately, we set a standard that they have to conform to that's different than the world that they live in. Um, and so that's why I think what we do is vitally important. But I look at those boys, and if you see, the key coin word today is trauma. I think that means a lot of different things um, in terms of our community, especially with our boys and girls. Um, Trauma means they're missing. They don't have things at home. Some of them don't have parents. Some of them don't have folks who are um, caring about them every day and doing what they need. Some of them do have parents. Those parents are raising them in a different way than we were raised. Um, and although I'm not trying to raise anyone's kids or anything, but there are certain standards of accountability that I talked about, which we had when we came home. I don't always feel the kids have today. So that's where I'll start off with. Like I said, start off when you're young. Think about those folks when you're young. And we had folks in our community, uh, both communities I lived in, who, like I said, we looked up to, who looked after, groups of us, whether we were on sports teams or, you know, I'm talking about, living here in Harrisburg. We had, down in Royal Terrace, we had our Jay's Afro. So we had a barbershop gentleman, Jay, who looked after just about every young man in there, giving them sometimes free haircuts, but more importantly, gave them opportunities to go and represent their neighborhoods in a positive way. And for our outlet, that was basketball. Um, we did that in a positive way. But he supported us. We had the corner store. Back then, when I was growing up, our corner stores were still run by African Americans, primarily males, Uh, and Mr. Franklin or Mr. Anderson, those folks, you went in the store, you respected them. And we had a couple guys who would go in their neighborhood and they try to steal a bag of chips and all that other stuff because they had some issues of their own. But they set a standard for us in terms of, what they would put in their stores. They would put in our stores. They didn't have that stuff that was killing us every day in their stores. Of course, they had cigarettes. I mean, the community, and all that stuff. We always got the stuff in our community that supports us in a negative way. But they also always had milk, bread, and eggs every single day. And so those are some of the as I think about some of the landmark individuals and cornerstone folks in our communities that we really look. I think that we really looked up to. We might not have looked up to them then at the time because we were young enough, but we definitely know now, the generation that I'm in, and my peers, we look back and those are the folks that we talk about. We thank God for them. Um, and when I thought about this show, and I thought about you and I heard you, Richard, you talked about, you stated, you're a little seasoned in your age now, and you speak from a different level now. Uh, so do I. And I'm looking at retirement at some point too. I'm not at that. I'm at a ripe age. As I told you, I'm here nursing. This is my first public appearance with you. Thanks for calling me and putting me out because I had some major surgery last month, uh, and dealing with that. And I'm back on my starting to get back on my feet and everything. Um, but I'm gonna kind of close with this, or just kind of transition it with this is that my mantra probably for the last 10 years, Richard, especially since I took the position, is that I've been looking at the folks who I helped groom, and I call them the 25 to 35s, because when we got involved with our communities, we got involved with our kids, and that's the age that we were at, somewhere between 25 and 35. And that's where we made an impact. The folks who impacted me, Sherman Cunningham, with George Caldwell, Harry Hafer, those folks were in those age groups when we started. And then at the age group that we are at now is the age group where they began to transition, and folks like myself, others from out the community, Des Mangus, Brian Majors, and others, and those folks who are in the community every day doing the great work, are starting to pick up those pieces, but it ain't enough. It's not enough. And I'm always reaching out to my alumni guys who, come through, over past 30 years that I've been involved with the organization. And I'm saying to them, they gotta come back and do. And a lot of them are doing well. That's what's great is a lot of them are doing well, but what has happened is we've turned into our silos, and especially from the city, from the city perspective. And I'll just say this, Richard, and a lot of us have moved out of the city and don't live in the cities as much. I think I always have a connection, always will have a connection in the city. But like you said, going around the world, even though the world is big, the world is small. When you go around the world, I see a lot of the exact same things that I see in Allison Hill, in Southside, that I see in East Oakland, that I see in Hayward, that I see in Richmond, that I see over in Costa Rica. When you land in them island countries, You know what you see? You see poor people when you head to them resorts. When you land, like you said, when you was over in Europe, you saw, I was over in Europe too. I saw a lot of poor people in Europe. And a lot of those people that you're talking about are those people who end up getting involved in those activities and things like that because that's their easiest point of contact and target is to get involved in some of this criminal activity and things that they're doing out in the world. But that's the first thing I see. We got to realize that the world is small and it's happening here in our community, but it's a global issue that I've seen as as I've traveled in some of my limited travel. I have I've had some time to go around the world a little bit, but I have family members who have gone completely around the world, and they tell me the exact same things on those places that I haven't been yet. But I'll stop there and transition and tell me what you think.
Okay, before we do, my guest has to leave, and I want to get his perspective. Give me your perspective of what we're talking about generally.
Well, I do think that there were some great points made, and I think as a black man, there's definitely and has always been some potholes and obstacles developing. I know you mentioned boys in particular. Growing up in my community, I spent a lot of time in the YMCA. So I'm very grateful for the YMCA because I could meet people from whether I was in a Boys and Girls Club, but particularly in the YMCA, go there, I could swim, I could break dance, spend time break dancing there. I will tell you a short story. I was walking out of the YMCA one day, right off of 63rd Street there in Chicago, and someone asked me what time it was. I looked down, and usually, because of my just growing up in the streets, I usually keep eye contact when people ask me stuff, because this is a very violent, this is Chicago, because it's one of the most dangerous ghettos in America at that time. And looked down, gave him the time, he ran up on me, put a gun in my head. So why? He said, hey, give me everything you got. I'm looking like, everything you got? I only had $2. I got those $2 from delivering newspapers. I had a paper route. So I earned $2 from just that. And also, some of the seniors in the community trusted me as a young black male to go grocery shopping for them, because I would bring the money back, receipts, and the way I was raised. To make a long story short, the guy asked me for my money, looked at him, didn't know what to do. I just kept talking. Eventually, he put the gun down, and we kept talking, and he told me, hey man, my dad's locked up, mom's on drugs, I got a little brother, I'm just trying to get some money to eat. I was like, wow, man, take a come over my house in a couple of days. But when you come by, you get something to eat. Told my grandmother that, and she cooked a Thanksgiving dinner basically for him. Before he came in, I said, hey, that gun, you gotta put it up. But more importantly, you gotta come back to the YMCA with me. Because there were mentors there. There were people in our community that gave back, right? That looked like me, older black men. And so as a result of that, I was able to continue to talk to him, build a relationship, connecting with some males in my community, got him to go re-enroll in high school, and he enlisted in the Army and had a fantastic career. So I share that story because it was people who looked like us gave back in a moment of crisis, and we have a great debt. And I appreciate, Mark, your leadership. Because your leadership in organizations that you run make impact on people like me. So I want to say thank you so much, because you have no idea, had it not been for organizations like the YMCA, I can assure that I have a slight chance of telling the story today. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'm
Richard,
going to. Sure.
Richard, could I ask your guest one question?
Sure.
Because he mentioned something that I'm kind of an advocate for. So he mentioned about swimming at the Y. And if I would tell you, I would dare to ask your guest, would that be the place living in the south side of Chicago where there's probably not a lot of public pools and things like that? One of the things that I've been an advocate for is that our kids, Black folks in particular, we don't get an opportunity to learn a life skill, which is swimming in our communities. Here in Harrisburg now, we barely have one public pool available to us. And the one public pool that we used to have two, and that pool used to be, I could tell you, thousands of kids that we've taken to those pools, and they've learned to survive and learn how to swim and learn how to be comfortable in an environment of water. And I think everyone knows that just the proportion of statistics in terms of Black folks when we get in waters, when we get close to get on boats and things like that, we are the ones who perish quicker because we are uncomfortable in water and we haven't had those opportunities. I just wanted to know, was the Y the place that gave you the opportunity to learn how to swim and be comfortable in water?
Well, before I head out, great question, by the way.
Mhm.
That I learned first how to, in high school, swim a little bit, but the Y was the place where I actually developed my swimming skills and had somebody who's like, get in and walk me through it. The pool was really clean because in the community, that was a pool, but had dirt bikes in it, rusted out. The water was brown, dark brown. It was,
Right.
and so being able to come into the YMCA, swim, it taught us etiquette. It was just fun, festive, and it was a clean environment, a safe environment. Gangs were not allowed to come up in there, and everybody knew it's like, oh, that's the Y, hands off, right? And so, unfortunately, I have to run, but I want to take the time to say thank you so much, Richard, Mark. I celebrate
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You
Thank
both
you.
in speedy recovery, Marie. I'm sure we'll be talking. If you do have time, please come out to the Coaching Coffee and Conversation event on April the 25th at 9 a.m. Love to connect. We have so much to talk about. And
Okay.
I welcome the opportunity to support your leadership in your organization. How about that?
I appreciate that so much, and we'll do. If I'm out and about, I will definitely make that trip out that way. Richard, if come pick me up and take me down there, I'll definitely go.
Okay.
Not sure if I'll be driving by that time, Richard. Okay,
Okay,
so
gotcha. Okay, thank you for coming. Okay, let's get back into now. I'm not naive, not to think that a pillar in our community back then was the church. The church was a major pillar in our community. It was one of the social gatherings where we went, and we don't have that connection like we used to have that connection. But would you not say it is our responsibility, whether it's you or me or whoever, and the reason I'm bringing this up, there's so many people out there that got so much knowledge. There's so many people out there that are just doing good, and we need to know who they are. Kids have to identify with them. I mean, I'm not naive. I admit to anybody, yeah, these kids see basketball players, they see football players, they see them on TV, and they want to be like them, and most of them will never be like them. But at the same time, when I was growing up, many of those athletes lived in the neighborhood or they were around. They were much more approachable. And sometimes we use role models that is not always that good. You know, you look back at rappers and the messages they talk about. My issue is who defines us. That's our real issue. Who defines us? We're talking about being a black man. But really, you're a black boy before you become a black man. So when you talk about that, where did the structure come to where you're going to be a black man? You remember, I mean, I tell everybody, the greatest thing in my life, one of the things was the Million Man March. I was there. I saw us there.
I
I
was
had
there.
hope for us, vision for us. And we started out, and it's gotten a little slow, but now we've become not being responsible. And when I say be responsible, I think that we as adults need to step up and give young people guidance. We got to give them hope. You know, we talk about, I am not naive. We do see some things a little different. Now, I didn't see the murders that is so common now. I didn't see everybody, half the people getting locked up. I didn't see the major drug people. Yeah, did I know people that were on drugs? Yes. Do I know people that went to jail? Yes. But it wasn't a magnitude. So my point is, how do we as black men step up to the plate to reach back to the young black boy to let them know the rate they're going, it may not end up being too good. I don't want people to think that either you're going to be no hope, you're going to be locked up, or you just don't have no hope. And that's my real reason having you on here today, is trying to help me share with our audience, how can we encourage people not only to get involved, but hope.
Well, as I led it early in the conversation, and I had mentioned about us being into silos, and I think that begins to kind of tell some of the story because, as I recall, you mentioned the church. We talked about social organizations. Um, Heck, we can go back to where, organizations like the Panthers and stuff. Like, we develop social organizations to help us develop each other and our moral and ethical values, our moral compass, if you will. Um, and we've isolated each other, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, but we've become less socialized. I call it desocialization. Everyone, and the natural phenomenon of COVID exacerbated that to a level that allowed people to really desocialize. They don't go to, they don't even go to some of the social events that, I have young sons, well, young now, they're right in between that age group that I talked to you about, 25 and 35. And I would tell you the places that we used to go socialize. I'm not talking about just the traditional stuff of bars and all that, but places that they would have things for young people to go to, events, you know, concerts, whatever places to go. Heck, just going over to people's houses, whether it was back in the day, a house party was the best party that you can go to. You had 50, 60 something, maybe 100 people sometimes in a house party, but they don't have that opportunity to do those types of social engagements. We become a desocialization society is the term that I kind of use. We've desocialized. And so getting back to your question is, we have to reconnect to, I think, some of the cornerstone places. Number one, obviously the church. We got to set some ground in terms of our faith base and developing some moral clarity in that area. And there's, my opinion, no better place in the world than trying to get connected in your local churches. There are some great churches in our area. But then you have some of the social organizations. Richard, you're connected to the Wives. The young man was talking to, you know, Boys and Girls Club used to be in the YMCA growing up when I was young. And then when I even started in the business, we always had this antagonistic type of relationship. We had the Y and we had the club. And um, it caused for great competition. But what it did not cause for or what it did not provide us was uh, a unification in our neighborhoods. We had a lot of in that time we had a lot of neighborhood. We had more what we call neighborhood types of violence and kind of gang activity, or not even gang activity, but just kind of group activity that was negative. There was more a prevalence of you being from one side, you from south, you from the hill, you from uptown, or et cetera, et cetera. And um, there was a stigma about those areas because people were more they grew up in those areas and they had but now everyone's transient, as I call it. They're from everywhere. They don't live on the hill all their lives. They don't live on uptown all their lives. They don't live out south all their lives. They move. They move to Stilton. They move out to Susquehanna. They move to in and out through Harrisburg. Our kids are coming from all different places. They don't have that. At least they don't have that burden of kind of, hey, being trapped inside of a few blocks and calling that their neighborhood, and then associating that with some sort of false sense of ownership. Um, but in saying that, is the Y and the Boys and Girls Club has now we've begun to try to do some things to connect collaboratively, and I think we need to continue to build on those types of things and build on those young people who come through our organizations in the past, because collectively those people have now see the disadvantage of when they were separate because of the territory they live in. But I know now, I'm talking to many of them who either came from the Ys or came from the clubs and different other parts of it. They've all meshed and they've become more grown, and they understand the bigger scope of the world and the vision and things like that. So that's where I say starting our cornerstone institutions, begin to not be so isolated and doing things individually. Collectively, let's do things more in these institutions. Of course, that means I'm advocating for the organizations that you and I both have a relationship for, but there's so many others too. There's so many other organizations that are out there that are helping and doing some things. But even in that connection, we are all we're trying to do things in silos, and we could do so much. We could have so much of a greater purpose if we collectively just got kind of begin to work more together and count our numbers as larger numbers of serving larger people and larger populations. Because, as I stated earlier, parents who are raising their kids today have a different vision of what raising a child, to me, is, in what our vision was and what our parents and grandparents and things like that, what their vision was of raising them, in terms of what their expectations are for a child, what their limitations are for a child. Children have so much freedom, and they have so much access to things they don't traditionally need to have access to unstructured. Um, and unfortunately, I think because of what are now considered societal norms, parents allow these things, and it turns into what now becomes, as I said, that coined word of social trauma and things like that. So um, that's where I'd start, Richard. I'd start with the organizations, because I believe still, tried and true, as the gentleman on the caller, our organizations still support um, strong missions, and the missions haven't changed. Um, we are now, as you well know, as we're just trying to continue to allow people to know that we're here to service them in a capacity that, fortunately, in neighborhoods where, as they say, they need us most. Um, but because of these societal hangups now, where we've desocialized, there are parents who don't feel places are safe anymore. Who don't allow their kids to go. You know how many kids are no longer going to traditional brick and mortar schools, who are just sitting like you and I in front of a computer every day, and because that's effective. That's effective in their social development. When they don't go to a brick and mortar school, or they don't have another type of opportunity to engage with people, they are only engaging in whatever environment they have that their parents have created. And I guess you can't blame in some instances what has happened, but I know that there are a lot of kids out there who would do well in traditional schools, and as opposed to kind of saying that, the schools, they feel safer directly in, on a social, and being homeschooled and things like that. I just think that's becoming somewhat an Achilles heel to us in our communities, because I told a story, in an interview, early this year, that if you would see the difference of children who had not attended 2 to 3 years of school during COVID. So when we came back, everyone came back to full swing of being, basically, not doing any of the COVID restrictions and things. We opened back as a full society. Well, we had kids who had not been in first or second grade, or we had kids who missed third and fifth grade. So we had these kids who had 2 years of no social, and the impact was tremendous when coming into an organization like the club and the Y, where there are certain social structures that just come with the development of being a young person coming going to first grade, kindergarten, preschool, and getting all those types of social developments, whether it's sitting down, not, being quiet at a certain time. I mean, all these things were things that we had to work on with kids 2 and 3 times older than normal. So once again, I'll just kind of flip it back over to you. Tell me, pick
No,
your brain on what I've said.
I know. I agree. I agree with everything that you said. Um, I agree with everything that you said. But at the same time, I think at the same time, though, we as a society and we in our communities need to start holding people a lot more accountable for their actions. It's remarkable that kids watch everything that we do, and that's why I think it's very important. The conversation today is about being a black man, and I think that we have to take some responsibility as being those role models and showing, being positive. And we have to stop allowing excuses and hold people accountable. That is one of the issues that has troubled me when I see, whether it's kids or I see some adults, their behavior is not really justified, and they come up with 100 excuses, not understanding kids in itself. So I personally believe that we as a society and we as a group, we got to do a better job, and we got to come out of those silos, and we got to start merging together. Because my point of this is, they need help, we need help, and we all need to work together. You see, that has been one of the problems that we've always allowed people to separate us. Whether you go, even in school, if you were smart, if you were dumb or whatever you were, whatever, people made fun of you, and you became in a class. We need to stop doing this and reaching out to everyone and saying we all bring something to the table. Everyone has good. Everybody has good. And maybe what we need to do is start preaching that they all have good, because I'm just tired of hearing young people say they don't have no hope. But there's so many positive men out there that are doing so many great things, and they need to know who they are so they can identify with them, because I think what it does in the long run, it gives them hope, because they see somebody that's very successful. So people like you and the agency that you have, you're right. uh, when we were growing up, when I was growing, we didn't have no choice but to go to those kinds of organizations. I mean, it was it. You know, the Y Boys and Girls Club, even the Salvation Army, or
Hmm.
whatever the church. Those were the. Now, like you said, everybody's on social book. These kids don't have no social skills, but we as an adults, we owe it to them to do a better job of what we've been doing. We've been sitting there going, yeah, okay, Johnny over there or whatever, he ain't gonna be this, he ain't gonna be that. Stop saying that. Say to Johnny, hey Johnny, you know what? You're good this, you're good that, and give them some positiveness. Because if we give hope, even though people say generations, I'm sure they said that our generation was lost, and now we're hearing the same conversation. The next generation is lost. We are in this together. And so having people like you who go out, you give it 100%, and people don't understand that you do it because you believe in what you believe in. You're dedicated. You ain't doing it because you're going to get rich. Because if you was going to do that, you'd have quit 15 times, and because you're dedicated. My point is this here, and I'm going to let you close. My point is this here. We're going to have discussions like this because I think we need to have discussions like this because we don't have discussions like this. And
Right.
that's why I do the program. That's why I called you and say, let's talk about this. Somebody will say,
Right.
well, I thought you was going to talk about something. No, we're going to talk about all kinds of things. And
Right.
one of the things that I'm going to bring up, and I must say this because you brought it up, trauma. We need to do a better job talking about mental health.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because we need to understand mental health, what affects our environment. And sometimes we end up forming an opinion on this person or that person, not understanding what they've been through. And my point is, what not only what they've been through, but we've all been through things. All of us have. And we need to take the positive things that we have done and share it and tell our story so that we can give hope, vision, and dreams to young people. So I'm saying to black men, step up. It's time for us
Yeah.
to step up, get off the porch of finding 100 excuses, because there's so many brilliant people out there that have done so much. We need to know about them. We need to be able to tell our story. So time has gone so fast. So in the next couple minutes, what would you say that we should say to the audience?
Well, it just in terms of what I want to answer one of your questions. You said holding folks accountable, and I have a quick story about that because we have so many, and like you said, not living through excuses. Number one, I think we have to figure out a way to do that. I mean, that's a tough. I have a young man who I'm thinking of right now who was a active participant in activities at the club and everything, and COVID happened. And he loved when he was when he would come to the club, he loved being in the computer lab. We were setting him up to learn how to um, not just use the computer but understand the computer. He started learning. We would have people come in and teach him and others, what computers and how they build games and how to craft. So this was, like I said, all prior to COVID. And then now I still see his father, but I haven't seen this child once since COVID. I see his father, and I ask him every time I see him, where's your son? I can't get him off the game.
Wow.
I can't get him off the game. He don't want to come out no more. He's cyber school now. He don't go to school. He don't go to traditional school, and he doesn't come. And this was a brilliant young man, a respectable young child, young brown boy who's going to be a young man who has no, who has in the last 5 years had really no social development outside of his own structure, his own house and walls and whatever he's doing on his game system and all that stuff. So not talking about that boy, now talking with the father and saying, hey, how do we hold him accountable? This man goes to work every day and supports his child, and and provides a home, provides him a safe home, clothing, and all those types of things. But the next step of that is, as I said earlier when we started this conversation, is that our parents held us to a different set of standards and values. Because when we woke up in the morning, do your chores and get out the house. That was the standard. Go to play with your friends. People knocking on your door because such and such, come out and play. I just saw a commercial. What's the one of the sports stores? It was a beautiful commercial. They said and it showed these two boys, and one boy come knock on the door, and the commercial man says, "Wait for it, wait for it." He says, "Can such and such come out and play?" And they run out. And three or four boys run outside with balls and bats and stuff. And he said, and that was the commercial, because that's such a anomaly now. It's not common for kids to go and socialize with each other, and it's becoming more uncommon for parents to require that. So, to your point, that's the area I'm saying we have to find how to hold them to a standard of getting their children out of these silos, getting themselves out of these silos, and getting them more involved in the world that we live in, not their world.
I will end with this. We have a responsibility to reach back and help our young people, because we were afforded it and they deserve it as well as we do. So, ladies and gentlemen, this whole point of this conversation is to get you to think. Him and I don't have all the answers. We just want you to think about the conversation. This was it about, for you to have your own conversation so that you can engage. That's what it's all about. Did you know? For you to think about it. Mark, I think that what I would like to do, I'm going to bring you back on here when you get amends, and we're going to continue to have these kinds of conversations, because that's the problem. We don't have these conversations. We don't talk about this, and we need to. And so I'm going to leave you on this. I promise you, we're going to try to get out the silo. So,
Okay.
do you have anything else to say before we leave?
I appreciate it once again, Richard, giving me the opportunity. More importantly, just appreciate speaking with you as always. I like doing that, and let's get together soon. I'd like to speak with you shortly, and I have some other things to talk with you about. But thank you, and thank you, your audience, for listening.
Thank you, audience. But listen, audience, it's about you. What are you going to do? How are you going to show up to help our legacy to continue to be carried on? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
That was a little different, wasn't it?
Very good.
Thank you for watching Did You Know with Richard Utley. Please mark your calendar and join us every first and third Tuesday at 11 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube. Did you know? If you would like to be a guest on the show, or if you have an interesting topic or individual that you would like to see us discuss during future broadcasts, you can reach out to us on Facebook at Richard Utley. Until next time, have a nice day, and we will see you again for another Did You Know, and can be found on most of